I fear not the dark itself, but what may lurk within it. Welcome to Lurk, bringing you creepy, strange, and bone-chilling stories, with your host, Jamie Jackson.
Hey lurkers, welcome to this week's episode. This week we're going to be talking about an area known for strange disappearances and UFOs, and it's triangle shaped, and if you guessed the Bermuda Triangle, you'd be wrong. Today we're heading northwest to the state of Alaska to look at the area that's known as the Alaska Triangle. Before we get started, I wanted to give a shout out to one of our lurkers, Crystal, who is actually traveling near the Alaska Triangle to get married. So congrats on your wedding, Crystal, and watch out for weird crap while you're there. The Alaska Triangle connects the state's largest city of Anchorage in the south with Juneau in the southeast panhandle, and then to the small town of Barrow, which is located on the state's northern coast. The area is considered to contain some of North America's most unforgiving wilderness. The state contains rugged and forested terrain with glaciers, earthquakes, volcanic activity, and boasts almost 3 million lakes. That wasn't a typo, that is actually 3 million lakes. And it's comprised of about 365 million acres. In the area of the Alaska Triangle, 16,000 people have disappeared there since 1988, which is more than twice the national average. And in fact, the area is considered so sinister, many people refer to the area as the Devil's Triangle to emphasize just how evil the area is. But it wasn't until October of 1972 that the area began getting a lot of attention. In 1972, a small private plane carrying U.S. House Majority Leader Hale Boggs, Alaska Congressman Nick Begich, and aide Russell Brown, and the Bush pilot Don Johns vanished while flying from Anchorage to Juneau, which was a 580-mile flight. The plane they were in was a twin-engine Cessna 310, a plane that is considered reliable, and one without much of a troubled past. Pilot Don Johns had more than 10,000 hours of flight experience. One person said Don Johns was very capable of parking this aircraft in an extremely confined area. Johns filed the flight plan 12 minutes after takeoff, which was their last communication. There were no signs of trouble at takeoff. When the plane failed to show on Monday, October 16, 1972, the search began. Hale Boggs was a much-loved politician, and they spared no expense in the search. A super-secret Air Force spy plane was used in the search, and 73 other planes joined in on a coordinating grid pattern. A ground team also searched the area near their last transmission. Civilian planes and boats were also involved in the search that covered 32,000 square miles, and they searched for weeks, but no evidence of the plane, the men, the wreckage, or debris were ever found. After this incident, Congress passed a law to require emergency locator transmitters in all U.S. civilian aircraft. This was the disappearance that brought attention to the area known as the Alaska Triangle. But it wasn't the first. January 26, 1950, at 11:15 a.m., a Douglas C-54D Skymaster left Elmendorf Air Force Base, headed for Montana. The C-54 was a standard military transport plane with a 100-foot wingspan. On this flight, there were 36 passengers and 8 crew. All were military personnel, except for 2 who were military dependents: the pregnant wife of an Air Force Master Sergeant and their young son. The flight was a routine 8.5-hour flight, and good weather was expected. The skies were clear and allowed for excellent visibility. The pilot reported the plane's position as they passed communication stations. 2 hours into the flight, the plane passed over the Alaskan border into the Canadian Yukon, and as it passed over the Snag Radio Range near Beaver Creek, the pilot called the station and estimated they would reach the next reporting point in 20 minutes. The call to Snag was routine, and no problems were mentioned. The weather was still good. But the next station got no call, and no other transmissions were ever received. When the plane didn't reach its destination, it was immediately listed as missing, and a massive search was started. At the time, the U.S. and Canadian militaries in the area were preparing to commence a large war game operation. The war games were called off, and all the resources were put into the search. 7,000 ground troops and 85 planes searched 300,000 square miles. It was the greatest air search ever conducted, and it cost $1 million, which is equivalent to nearly $12.3 million today. During the search, rescuers thought they were going to find the plane because they were picking up distress signals from an unknown source. The signals sounded like someone talking on the radio that wasn't quite clear enough to understand. The location of the signal couldn't be pinpointed. They were distorted and distant and eventually disappeared. There were also 3 planes that went down during the search. There were no fatalities, but after the investigations, none of the details of the crashes were released. Then a 4th aircraft crashed. The 4th plane was twice as big as the others, and it cost $4 million. It was a B-36 nuclear bomber flying a training mission from Elmendorf Air Force Base to Texas. The bomber lost power, had to jettison the nuclear bomb in the ocean, and it crashed. The bomb was never recovered. During this time, the Cold War was going on. The Soviet Union and the United States were in a nuclear arms race, and only 56 miles separated Russia from Alaska. This meant that Alaska was one of the most surveilled airspaces at the time. In February 1950, shortly after the disappearance of the Douglas C-54, UFOs were seen stalking U.S. naval planes. A Navy pilot saw a UFO while training, and radar clocked the object at 1,800 miles per hour, far faster than anything the military had at the time. Air traffic control became concerned because there wasn't supposed to be anything in the air other than the Navy plane. The UFO vanished suddenly, then reappeared, stalking the plane, then it disappeared again. The encounter was kept quiet until a Freedom of Information Act request in the 1970s forced the military to release a heavily redacted report. A few days after this incident, a lieutenant commander at Elmendorf Air Force Base saw 3 orange objects in the sky above the base, flying at about 25,000 feet, before they simply vanished. Then, several years later, in 1958, moose hunters claimed they saw a metallic, oval-shaped UFO hovering over a marsh. So what happened to these planes? Could the strange, unexplained, and unlocatable distress signals come from inside a portal that the plane unknowingly flew into? Or was it aliens? I'm not saying it's aliens, but normally I wouldn't be quick to jump on the alien bandwagon, but let me tell you about what happened in 1986. That might put a little bit of a different spin on things. Honestly, I feel like 1986 was like 10 or 15 years ago, and it was really like almost 40 years ago. Makes me feel really old. Like the Crypt Keeper. So on November 7th, 1986, a 747 cargo plane was flying from Paris to Tokyo and entered into the area known as the Alaska Triangle. Captain Tarucci was the pilot of the 747, and he was an ex-fighter pilot and veteran of the Air Force, with 20 years' experience as a commercial airline pilot. At 5:11 p.m., about 2,000 feet below the aircraft, are what the captain thinks are military aircraft. The captain radioed air traffic control, and air traffic control picked up high-speed objects that seemed to be tracking the 747. At first, no one was super scared or concerned, thinking there was most likely a logical explanation. Air traffic control contacted nearby Air Force Base, who said they had nothing in the air in that area. The two objects jumped from 2,000 feet below the plane to directly in front of it. They stopped, started, and accelerated, unlike anything the captain had ever seen before, and the captain actually feared there was going to be a mid-air collision. The objects had no wings, and the lights on it became intense, and the aircraft began to shake. The captain said he could feel the heat on his face from the object before the objects disappeared. The captain assumed it was over, but then the objects came back, this time flying in a formation with a huge third object, the size of an aircraft carrier, but walnut-shaped. It was 8 to 10 times the size of the aircraft. The Air Force Base notified that they were also picking up the objects on the radar. Air traffic control grew concerned and advised the 747 to make a 360-degree turn and then descend to 31,000 feet. The plane started its turn, and the UFOs followed. The captain refused fighter jet assistance, fearing it would antagonize the objects. Air traffic control radioed a civilian jet in the area to approach the 747 and investigate. The UFOs disappeared off radar just as the United Airlines plane got close to see what was going on. From beginning to end, this was a 42-minute encounter that was witnessed by the crew of the 747, air traffic control, and the military. It's considered one of the most credible UFO cases. When the captain described the mothership, he said it was large and huge. There was an investigation into the incident where the radar and cockpit recordings were used. 4 months later, the FFA tried to explain it away, but one of the investigators on the case had made copies of everything and ended up releasing them to the public. Alaska has more UFO sightings than any other state in the United States, with most of those sightings occurring near the center of the triangle. In 1978, some hikers were camped out on a ridge when they woke up in the night to see a UFO in the valley below. They hiked down to it, but by the time they made it there, the object was gone. Instead, there was an indentation in the ground, and allegedly mutilated animals, including moose, bear, caribou, elk, and a 15-foot killer whale. In 2003, an electrician working on a remote wilderness lodge saw 3 to 4 lights very high in the sky, traveling at a fast speed. More lights appeared, and the man called for his fellow workers to come witness what was going on. Some of the lights sped up, turned around, and headed straight towards the other lights. Other lights made 90-degree turns before eventually disappearing. In Fairbanks, Alaska, on May 13, 2016, a security officer filmed a strange flashing light in the sky that split into 3 separate lights. No satellite or aircraft is capable of doing that. I actually posted that video on our Facebook page. So if you're interested, you can go to the Facebook page and find that link. It's on YouTube, so you may be able to search it. As I said, that was Fairbanks, Alaska, May 13th, 2016. The number of sightings, around 6,500, has led some people to believe that there might be some kind of alien base underneath Mount Hayes in the center of the Alaska Triangle. Mount Hayes is 14,000 feet high and located in an area that is incredibly difficult to reach. Now we're going to get into a little bit of CIA operations, right? Really just one. In 1978, the CIA had a project going on based in Fort Meade, Maryland, called Project Stargate. The project was looking into the possibility of using people with psychic ability in military applications. Probably should try to do an episode on some of the crazy CIA projects that were going on. But we're just going to touch upon this a little bit. With this project, they were specifically looking into what is called remote viewing, where a person is able to see a location in their mind and draw what they see or describe it. Pretty sure the movie Men Who Stare at Goats dealt with this specific project. And the remote viewing actually worked. One very talented remote viewer was a Burbank police officer named Pat Price. In fact, a former CIA agent said of Pat, he was extraordinarily accurate, unbelievably accurate. While doing a remote viewing session, Pat Price was drawn to Mount Hayes, where he saw an alien base. Inside the base, he saw a strange device with cables, and deep underground, inside the base, were super advanced humanoids working alongside normal humans. It seemed to be a joint military and alien base. In case you're curious, Pat Price died mysteriously in Las Vegas. The day before his death, he met with members of the NSA. Then he died of what was said to be a heart attack, and he was found in a hotel room. But before his family was even notified, officials cremated his body. There's a little bit more to his death, but we're just really paraphrasing this for the sake of this episode. I think he actually had somebody bump into him earlier in the day, and then later he was complaining he didn't feel good, then apparently died of a heart attack or heart attack-like symptoms. Very suspicious. So Mount Hayes isn't the only possible underground base or anomaly in Alaska. It's gonna get weird. Honestly, aliens aren't my favorite. They scare the crap out of me. But for me personally, I have a hard time coming to terms with underground alien bases. I'm not saying they couldn't exist. That's just a hard reality for me to accept. I'm pretty skeptical about that. I don't know. I'm not saying it couldn't. I'm just saying it's harder for me to believe than other things. So there's also some speculation about a strange formation underground in the shape of a large pyramid that's referred to as the Dark Pyramid. So this is a little bit confusing about how this came to be, so hopefully I can do the story justice. In 1992, a man named Doug Munchler, who was a former counterintelligence person, sees a news program reporting that scientists got readings that indicated there was a giant pyramid larger than Giza, and the Giza pyramid is 450 feet high from base to the tip, that they found this giant pyramid object underground, and this information had been based on seismic readings. Apparently China had detonated an underground bomb, and the seismic readings from that are what scientists got their readings from. Now this is actually technology that's used today. If anybody out there watches The Curse of Oak Island, I love that show. They actually use seismic readings to make an underground map of the area. So that's basically what happened here. The seismic readings from this large bomb detonated underground were used to map areas underground, and they find this giant pyramid-shaped structure. So looking at a map of Alaska, Doug Munchler sees that there's an area that has been whited out, and it's close to the area that this large underground pyramid was said to be located. So he goes to the local news station to ask about the report, and the station manager completely denies that they aired any story about a pyramid underground. He said, never did it. But as Munchler is leaving the studio, there's a younger producer who stops him and tells him that two men came and confiscated the tapes of the news story. In 1993, the next year, Munchler is at Fort Meade, Maryland, and he went to the archivist, asked where he can get information on Alaska. He's sent to the room, finds the folder on Alaska, and as he's sitting there getting ready to go through the folder, two men come in, take the folder away, and tell him he's not allowed to see any of the information in it. So we're going to jump a few years to 2012. Munchler reaches out to an investigative reporter named Linda Moulton Howe for help. Now, she's known in the alien circles, UFO circles. I've seen her talk about cattle mutilation. She knows quite a bit about that. So while she's an investigative reporter, I would say she's not really a mainstream regular news investigative reporter. So anyway, he reaches out to her for help. And as she began looking into the information, she received an anonymous call from someone. This person said that the large pyramid was ancient and that it was made from solid black stone, and that it's supposed to be about 550 feet high. Which, if you remember, if that news report actually aired, Munchler said that the news report stated it was taller than the Giza pyramid, which is 450 feet. So this one was bigger by 100 feet, from the base of the pyramid to the tip. Further investigation brought her to radio host Bruce Pearson. Pearson remembered that in 1978, his father called him and told him he was in a helicopter that was taking him to a secret base in Alaska. When they reached their destination, people there were in black uniforms with no insignia, and they came and took stuff off of the helicopter. He overheard the talk of an underground facility. In 2017, an email from a woman, remote viewing, said that she saw a pyramid. She drew sketches and computer diagrams. It was made of black stone and had tunnels and chambers around it. There were alien humanoids there, and there was energy coming off the pyramid. She felt it was a power source used to energize UFOs. Perhaps this could explain the large number of UFO sightings in Alaska. Pyramids are found all over the world, and many people believe that pyramids have been built upon ley lines, and that they harness the energy found there. But who built this underground pyramid, and is it actually there? In researching the area, one man discovered a squared-off area as he flew over, an old road, and an abandoned airstrip in an area where the pyramid is reported to be located. So by squared-off area, if you look at a pyramid, the base of the pyramid actually forms a square. So seeing the squared-off area on the ground, like he's flying over the area, he sees this large squared off area. It could be when stone heats up, it will kill vegetation on the surface, so it'll kill the grass. If you have a large stone in the ground under your lawn, it will kill the grass on the top if it gets really hot, whatever. So if you have something that has a stone base to it, it's possible that it could get hot enough that it would kill the vegetation above it and form the squared off area. But is the pyramid there? Who knows? That there's no footage of the news report anywhere to be found. It's hard to say, but it's interesting. So another possible thing at work in the Alaska Triangle are vortices or vortexes. In case you're interested, I looked. Either plural form is accepted. I'll use vortexes, though my brain would rather use vortices, but it makes me sound like an English nerd, which I am, admittedly, but I'll refrain from being nerdish. So energy vortexes are supposed to be swirling centers of energy that are concentrated in certain areas where energy seems to be the most intense. The energy radiates in a cone-shaped spiraling clockwise or counterclockwise, creating positive or negative effects. And they affect humans in different physical, mental, and emotional ways. Positive vortexes move upward in a clockwise motion, and they enhance the flow of energy. This type of vortex is said to be healing and boost creativity and self-exploration. We mentioned this kind of vortex in episode 32, which was part 2 of the Mount Shasta episodes. Other areas with these types of vortexes are Sedona, Arizona, Stonehenge, and the Egyptian pyramids. On the flip side, those vortexes that spiral downward in a counterclockwise motion are negative and are said to drain or deplete energy, causing health problems, depression, confusion, disorientation, and audio and visual hallucinations. Readings have proven that there are large concentrations of magnetic anomalies in Alaska. Some have even disrupted compasses to the point of making them 30 degrees off. So what is behind all this strange phenomenon? Did the planes go missing in a freak storm? Did they fly into a portal to another dimension? Were they grabbed by a UFO? And what about the 16,000 missing people? What is their story? Personally, the missing people don't freak me out too much. Alaska is wilderness. It's wilderness that is largely unpopulated with people, but heavily populated with animals like moose and bear, both creatures that can kill a human. In fact, moose sometimes are considered more dangerous than a bear. I think animals and unforgiving terrain explain what happened to a large number of the missing. For what other strangeness might be lurking in the midst of the Alaska Triangle? Make sure you tune in next Friday for part 2 of the Alaska Triangle. Sorry guys, that means this is the end of part 1. I did not intend for this to span into 2 parts, but it turns out there's a lot to this crazy triangle thing. Next week, we're going to be looking at some of the strange creatures that are roaming around the wilderness of Alaska. And there are some strange ones. Remember that you can find Lurk wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts or at lurkpodcast.com. On the website, you can find episodes and links to our social media accounts. I share photos and videos pertaining to episodes on our social media, so make sure you like or follow us on one of them, or all of them. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'd have to say that I'm most active on Facebook. Next would be Instagram. If you have a moment, it would be awesome if you could give us a 5-star review, if your podcast app allows for that. Reviews help us to be seen by others with similar podcast interests. And until next time, keep lurking.